Chapter 19. Vittoria stared at the shifting shadows of the ocean for a long time. The flicker of movement as Benot's men patrolled the house reassured her. Mateo and Benot were in the dining room, their voices a low rumble. The safety of Mateo's house gave her a physical sensation of relief. It allowed her mind to unwind and process what had happened in the ballroom tonight. She leaned against a pillow in her curtained-off area and stared out at the sea, her mind rolling back. Back, back, back. Vittoria thought of the smelly, netchy streets that she knew so well, the workers she'd visited there with Mateo the last several nights, with Benot, the magnolias in her hair, on her cape, on her dress during the betrothal. She remembered the mob and what they'd cried. La Principessa. Mateo's lack of concern over her going back into Netchi, the silver that Benot's men just happened to find and happened to give to her. She remembered everything. Especially the quiet female rebel at the ball, who had asked, La Principessa, is it really, are you? In that moment, Vittoria had comprehended three things. The workers thought she was a giver come to life. Mateo wanted them to think that, and she knew that rebel's voice. Vittoria thought about the rebels next, the power of their palpable desperation, the way they'd stormed the room but didn't attack. Thankfully, no one had died tonight. This was more of a scare than an attack. She'd seen no faces in that raid. Had the Netchi rebels hoped to test themselves against the landowners? Were they there to harm anyone? They clearly had some magic, but was it enough? Their attack had been haphazard at best, poorly organized. It could never have worked, and they left so early. So why attack? Pikes would stand as punishment for this. There had to be a reason. Her mind skipped around, unable to focus. Some of the rebels seemed to really believe that she was La Principessa. Or had that just been their hope? Were belief and hope different things? Had Mateo been using her? He hadn't told her everything, and that stung. Now her faith in him felt shaken. What else didn't she know? Your world here has never been safe, Mazuna, Mateo had whispered as he left her in her room to think. But now it is deadly. Romeo will kill you the moment he has a chance, so please don't leave before I can explain more. Vittoria rubbed her fingernail over her bottom lip. Mateo had clearly been afraid she'd cave, abandon this mad plan that made her a giver of all things. But wasn't it too late now? She had effectively nowhere to go, and Romeo would want to kill her. The screams of the landowners rang in her ears. When she blinked, she saw the way Mateo had snatched her at the very last moment. She'd seen Romeo for only a breath, the knife in his hand as he headed straight for her. Oh yes, he'd wanted to kill her. Honor be damned. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She straightened, then called out, Come in. Mateo's heavy steps advanced into the room, along with the flicker of a single candle. He set down the light with a little clatter. Then the sheets parted as he peered inside her hideout. May I come in? She gestured to the wall next to her. She was clad in her usual white dress. The flowers and pins had been removed from her head, leaving her hair on her shoulders. He'd changed into a fresh shirt and a pair of brown pants. He sat down heavily and sighed. For several moments, neither of them spoke. She was grateful for the silence, because she wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't sure what she was feeling. Every time she thought of the ballroom, prickles attacked her heart. Was this feeling betrayal? Fear? Relief? Finally, he broke the silence. I thought it would be more genuine and more successful if I didn't tell you the ultimate goal of all our work. She laughed, but it held no amusement. You thought I wouldn't agree to impersonate a giver, to pretend to be something that I'm not. Well, you were correct. You are a giving person long before I met you. I saw it in you, which is part of the reason I was drawn to you in the beginning. She sucked in a sharp breath, but refused to look at him. I am Vittoria Neria Antoinetta Guita, daughter of Neria Antoinetta Isabella Sol, an under-son Guita of the Mayfair Coven, a lavanda maid. There is nothing powerful about me. And yet you have already given your witches hope, food, and warmth. Your very presence tonight stopped an attack on the landowners that could have resulted in bloodshed on both sides. She frowned. You don't know that's why they stopped. I know half the witches in the room were kneeling to you, and if even 15 of them had knelt, that would have been enough to cripple any plan. 1,000 rebuttals surfaced on her tongue all at once, then dissolved at the same time. She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the wall. The rhythmic crash of the ocean soothed her. This is not what she'd wanted. To be a giver? That pressure. The idea of having to give hope in a world like this. I'm angry that you didn't tell me. Her fists clenched. She edged away from him, almost without realizing it. He let her go, but eyed the new space between them. I feel left out. I know. He swallowed. And I'm sorry, Vittoria. It wasn't fair. I don't even believe in the givers. How can I pretend to be one? Perhaps that's the reason you can. Her thoughts felt crowded. She didn't want to figure it out, to pretend to be something she wasn't. That felt wrong. But then, hadn't she already agreed to that? She was Mateo's betrothed, a fake landowner. The overwhelm led her to plant her forehead on her knees and take a deep breath. All her emotions were tangled up together. I never wanted to do anything to break your trust, but everything else was already so overwhelming for you. And, in the beginning, I didn't know if this wild plan would work. Those months when we didn't speak, I was just trying to prove it would work. Then it started to, and we had to move quickly. Mateo stared at his hands, where his fingers were tangled together, and continued. I meant it when I told you that I can't do this without you. He ran a hand through his hair. The East is split 3 different ways. The landowners, the workers, and the rebels. The only place where there is crossover is between the rebels and the workers. Workers flock to the rebels because they're frustrated or scared. Without the workers, the rebels wouldn't exist. If we can stop the workers from fighting as rebels, we have a chance at quelling a civil war when I take the throne. And the landowners? How will you cripple them? Her voice sounded sharper than she intended, but she didn't regret saying it. Did Mateo's roots keep him prejudiced in favor of the landowners? Was that part of what he meant when he said he needed her to bridge the gap between the classes? To represent the workers? The landowners are protected by the guardians, but the guardians are also workers for the most part. My hope is that it works the same way. If we can stop the guardians from protecting the landowners because they believe in La Principessa, the landowners might have to negotiate. Might? Magic. He shrugged. They have it. They could be powerful enough to defeat the workers by sheer magic, but it's hard to know for sure. Regardless, there's only one way to get all workers, most of the guardians, and some of the rebels to follow something. The givers. Exactly. It's the only common thread among them. In a conflict such as this, they need something bigger to follow. They're too afraid to choose sides on their own, and why shouldn't they be? It's death either way. Side with the rebels and fight with no guaranteed success against guardians and powerful magic. Side with the landowners, become a guardian, and they may have to kill their own families in defense of witches they can't stand. The workers needed a sign, a symbol, the most powerful symbol. La Principessa, she whispered, and her voice sounded stark, hollow, so colored with disbelief it didn't sound like her. Yes. He leaned forward, passionate now. It's the only thing that Romeo and my pair would never have seen coming. They could fight me and maybe win, but how do they fight a giver? How can they stop what we've started? The rumors of La Principessa are already crawling among the workers. After tonight, it will be a wildfire, and when hope sparks a flame, it turns to fire. She looked at him then. Despite her disgruntled frustration, she admired the way the shadows highlighted his jaw, his cheeks. He was pure, bottled power when he looked at her like that, as if he really believed this madness would work, that he could embody an idea as potent as a giver through her, a lavanda maid. Being a high priestess seemed like a stroll compared to this. Your pair and Romeo can still get rid of me. The name La Principessa doesn't protect me. In fact, tonight just made everything more dangerous, more difficult, more impossible, she thought morosely as she recalled Hode's brief appearance at the ball. Yes, it's why we must be so careful. Romeo responded rashly tonight. After some time, I think he'll work through it, realize that you're of more value to him alive than dead. If he kills you, the civil war is unstoppable because the workers will rise for their giver. But if he shatters their belief in you, then hope is gone. His only chance to win against La Principessa is to prove you're just a witch. That's why we must be careful. The audacious plan came together one piece at a time. She sank into it. It sent her mind down different paths, attempting to suss out just how wrong this had to be. How could it actually work? It was insane, desperate, wild, and yet so precise. In fact, it seemed so clear she was startled she hadn't seen it before. Perhaps she didn't want to. She wanted to remain furious that he hadn't been open with her. She wanted to smack him until her palms sang. But she clenched her fists as the ire died away. In truth, he'd been correct. She would have thought him totally unhinged. She never would have ventured out to give away food or silver. The witches never would have seen her among them, and this almost bloody night could have sparked the civil war they all feared so much. "I understand," she whispered reluctantly. Mateo studied her. "Do you hate me? Because I would understand if you do. And while I can reassure you there are no more surprises that I'm aware of myself, I wouldn't blame you for not trusting me." Her lips twitched. "I thought I did hate you for a while, but no, I could never hate you, Mateo. I see why you did it, and you were right. I never would have gone along had I known. But I do wish... Anyway, no more secrets?" "I swear it." The earnestness in his voice convinced her. "Do you see that this is the only way?" "Yes." He reached out, fingers on her chin, to gently persuade her to look at him. Nothing but concern shone from his dark eyes in the fading candlelight. "Will you be La Principessa, Vittoria? Now that you know, do you see how important you are? How worthy you are? Whether you see it or not, you have always been La Principessa. You have always given hope, to your witches and to me." Her heart quivered at the words. "I will be what my family and my witches need. I vow it to you." "Thank you." There was so much that lingered in the words. Vittoria leaned into him until he pulled her close. She closed her eyes. His warm breath felt like a caress on her cheek. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and held her close. She luxuriated in the heat that radiated from him, a sharp contrast to the cool wall at her back. His comfort tonight, of all nights, sang through her blood. She needed it so desperately, needed to feel as if there were a safe escape somewhere. A shocking thought struck her, and she drew back. "The test of magic is tomorrow." Her brow knitted together. "I had put it out of my mind. Can you?" He put a hand on her face. "I'll be fine. I'm ready." Her panic faded in response to his calm. "Can we really do this, Mateo?" she whispered, searching his eyes. "This plan feels so impossible, so overwhelming. There are so many things that can go wrong." "Yes, we can do this, but only together." She nodded and put her hand over his. Tomorrow, he'd face another harrowing test. Tomorrow would be another defining moment in this obnoxiously complicated plan he'd cooked up. Tomorrow could be another victory that moved them closer to freedom, to stability for her family and Nico, to clothes on their backs and education in their minds and hope in their hearts to stay. And it was comfort enough.